Hi, hello. So in this video, I want to talk about all the characters that have been released during Fontaine's story arc so far, since it's gonna be a while before Chiori shows up in 4.5. So in the meantime, I thought why not just make a video about all the characters that have been added to the game from 4.0 to 4.4 version, and give my thoughts about them, maybe even my feelings, how I feel about them. But yeah, this isn't really a scripted video. I'm just gonna give my own honest opinion when I think about these characters, since I built, reviewed, and used them in many team comps, including meta team comps. So yeah, let's just start with the first character. Now, in 4.0, we got a total of 3 characters, which was Lynette, Lyney, and Hydro Traveler. And starting with Lynette, I believe you just need to reach Adventure rank 25 and get her for free, which is nice, since she's an animo unit and you can easily utilize Viridian Venereer artifact set on her. And her skill works kinda similar to Yelan's, so we've got this traversal ability, and if you use her burst, she applies animo off-field, and one of her passives, depending on how many different elemental teammates you have, will provide an attack buff that can be as strong as an extra noblesse buff. But to be honest, she kinda gets outperformed by other animo units like Heizo, Kazuha, Sucrose, or Venti, because her grouping isn't that great, and compared to Heizo, her personal damage is also kinda lacking. So in reality, if you have another animo unit already built, there's not much point investing resources into her. However, since Fontaine region is full of Usi and Numa puzzles, you will be able to solve them pretty fast with Lynette, since her skill does deal Usi damage. And supposedly, she becomes a lot more interesting at C6, because she will gain Animo Infusion after using her skill, so you could easily turn her into a decent damage dealer by using units like Furina, Benny, Farazan, C4 Jean, and so on. But my Lynette is C0. After I got her for free, I didn't pull any extra copies from Lyney's banner. So I don't know, maybe once I unlock her C6, I can provide a better opinion about her, but so far at C0, she's a decent animo unit and she can do a couple of specific things compared to other animo units. Now, before I talk about her brother, here's a quick message from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Black Clover M, Rise of the Wizard King. Now, this is a new and highly polished gacha game that's based around Black Clover anime. You've got the original cast voicing the characters both in English and Japanese, beautiful in-game graphics and cutscenes, classic turn-based RPG goodness, with some great twists like powerful link moves, and you can even do tons of activities, like cooking, fishing, fighting in dungeons, and more when exploring the Magic Kingdom. And right now, you can pull for the new limited character Black Asta, who can unleash the power of darkness. And to start strong, beginning from February 12th, you can obtain up to 10 free summons. But make sure to do this quickly because the event lasts only 2 weeks. But that's not all. There's a big spring event happening right now, so make sure to clear the missions, gather spring coins, and exchange for awesome rewards. You can also do things like craft lunch boxes and surprise other mages with your gifts, so in return, you can receive special gifts yourself. And on top of this, you can also obtain Season 4 costume party skins for Noelle and Charmy. I mean, just look at these adorable little devil and pumpkin costumes. And if you complete special missions, you can also choose and unlock a free limited character from the Gateway of Reunion event. So make sure to download Black Clover M by using my link in the description or scan the QR code here, obtain the easiest 10 summons in your life, and join the spring event. Most important of all, you'll help support my channel by doing this. Okay, so back to Lyney and my thoughts about him. Now, I think he is a pretty insane damage dealer, and what's interesting is that you're encouraged to build pyro teams with him, since for each pyro teammate he has, his overall damage will increase, although obviously you still need to maintain pyro aura on enemies. But long story short, one of his best teams, which is Benny, Xiangling, and Kazuha, with this team comp, he can start dishing out some disgusting damage, and if you vertically invest into him, you will easily spot the payoff. Still, he is a damage dealer, and we have so many of them. And not to mention the fact he is a bow user and you need to use his charge attacks. And I personally dislike this, because sometimes you might get interrupted, which means you might want to use a shielder. Other times, if you're playing on mobile, maybe it's not that easy for you to aim. However, I will admit I use him a lot when I'm exploring, especially when I need to gather materials for new characters in Fontaine region, since he is the only one who can highlight them on the minimap. But overall, I would say that he is a very good damage dealer compared to all the others. Not to mention the fact you can also add Furina into his teams. And with Kazuha, you can even set up a good enough Hydro Aura on an enemy, and then you can vape his damage. Now, the last of the 4.0 trio is Hydro Traveler, and let me tell you, this elemental variation is a scam. Like, I honestly believe Hydro Traveler's entire purpose is to convince you to pull for Neuvilette, because you cannot move when shooting those water bubbles, the burst just sometimes goes out of bounds, and obviously even the damage when you put all the resources into this character, it's still not good enough. I mean, I made an entire video about this, so if you want to check it out, go and see it. But overall, this is probably one of the most lackluster Traveler variations. However, because this is the Hydro element, you can still find some uses. Still, what Hydro Traveler attempts to do, Neuvilette does it 10 times better. Now, the next character is Freminet, and I honestly think he's the black sheep of Fontaine's arc, at least so far. These days, I'm trying not to rely on Abyss usage rates. I know they are flawed, but when looking at them, this poor guy is like the top 5 most unused character. And I get it, his kit is pretty confusing. Like, you can play him as reverse melt damage dealer, you can also use him as an on-field driver for Hyperbloom comps, but his main playstyle Wriothesley is trying to sell to us is physical, because the majority of his constellations will improve his physical damage output. But obviously, if you played the game long enough, you should know that physical team comps are pretty underwhelming. Still, I think that he is a pretty unique character, and with the recent release of Xianyun, he could also become a plunge damage dealer with C6 Benny. So now, not only is he a cryo and physical damage dealer, but he can also become a pyro plunge damage dealer. Now, I don't think this comes off as a surprise, but Neuvilette is pretty much the most busted damage dealer of Fontaine's arc. Like, ever since he got released, I have been just mindlessly using him to complete all the content in the game. You can throw at him any Abyss Chamber, any boss, he will easily take care of it. And what's even better, literally one of his best weapons is Prototype Amber. Obviously you can get better ones, but you just need to craft it and he benefits so much from it. Now obviously Furina gives him a big boost in damage. And on top of that, if you're using both of them in the team, he also massively benefits from his first constellation, since with Furina, he's not able to achieve 3 different Hydro reactions. And on top of that, usually his teams with Furina do not include a shielder, so that means he can get knocked around when using the laser. So yeah, his C1 is a huge bait for players who are using him with Furina, and I'm not the biggest fan of this idea. Like, I personally don't have it, and I'm not planning to pull for it. But overall, even considering the fact that he is a damage dealer, he still brings enough value to face both single target and AoE situations. Not to mention the fact he can easily self-heal and utilize the Hunter set. I just think that if you're looking for the next big damage dealer, he is worth pulling for, provided you can get behind his laser playstyle. Now, unfortunately, I think Wriothesley got overshadowed by Neuvilette. And ironically, just like Neuvilette, his first constellation is also a huge bait for certain situations. Without it, activating his first passive is a bit harder, but with first constellation, all you have to do is just unleash his full normal attack combo and then follow up with the charge attack. And the damage coming from charge attack is pretty important because in quite a few teams you want to play him as reverse melt damage dealer, so not only does the first constellation allow him to spam his charge attack easier, but it also increases the damage, which means better melts. Still, he can be played in a lot of different teams like reverse melt, mono cryo, freeze, hyperbloom. He also works pretty well with Furina, and even if we ignore the first constellation bait, he is a really good cryo damage dealer. And not to mention the fact the way he delivers damage is pretty fun, at least to me personally, since I am a huge fan of Hazo's playstyle, so punching my enemies with cryo fists is really fun to me. Now, when it comes to Furina, I think most of us can agree that she's the most defining unit of Fontaine's arc. And personally, I think the best thing about her is that she made healers relevant. I mean, sure, some of them were already pretty popular, like Kokomi for freeze teams or Cookie for Hyperbloom comps, but now, if you have her, Jean, Mika, Charlotte, Noelle, Baiju, and quite a few more, they are now basically enhanced thanks to Furina. And the thing is, not only can she provide a big damage and healing boost for the team, she also dishes out very respectable damage. And I think Hoyo consolidated a lot of different roles into her. And previously, when I used to build my teams, I would always start with someone like Benny, Xingqiu, Nahida, or Kazuha. But nowadays, she's been burnt into my mind whenever I need to build a team. Because most of the time, if I add Furina to team and if I'm using a healer, it's very likely she will make the team better if I do this. So yeah, not much more needs to be said about her, especially if you like collecting Archons and you're an endgame player who has a healer built. I think she's a really good pull as well. Oh, and let's not forget the fact she's the best water walker in the game. Now, when Furina got released, you could also potentially pull Charlotte from her banner. And it's kind of funny, we got a second crowd catalyst when this combination never existed before. But I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Charlotte's main purpose is to be basically used with Furina if you want to. I mean, yeah, you can use her as a healer in other teams, like she's a decent driver for Hyperbloom or Burgeon comps, and you can use her as a substitute for some teams where you would need a cryo healer, but overall, she has the best synergy with Furina, and without her, her value would be much lower, since one of the best selling points about this unit is that she can do a really big one-time heal for the team when she uses her burst, and then also keeps providing continuous healing afterwards. Obviously, she can also do some cryo application, and you can also give her Thrilling Tales to boost your main damage dealer, so she's a fine healer. But my biggest problem with her is that when I need to depend on her cryo application, the hold version of her skill is far more better than her tap version. However, it feels very sluggish to use it, and you also need to make sure the enemies fit within the frame of the skill, so it's not as easy to use as Nahida's skill, for example. But yeah, I would say she's a decent healer, although a bit niche in some situations. Now, when it comes to Navia, you know, it's kind of funny. Some believe she was supposed to save Geo, and she kind of did. Not only did she bring back a dead reaction into the spotlight, but she also wants to bring a second Geo unit with her, because this helps enable the powerful Geo team resonance, and with it, she will deal a lot more damage. And the thing is, I love the fact she made crystallized matter, because now you're storing crystallized shards as ammo for her to shoot big damage with her gun, and I think this was a genius move by Hoyo, because let's all be honest here, crystallize is the worst reaction in the game. It's lame and irrelevant, but to take it and use it for some kind of a mechanic, that's an awesome idea. Obviously, that's not the only problem with Geo, because I'm not sure why Hoyo hasn't addressed this yet, but the problem with the limited amount of Geo constructs you can have on the field at the same time, plus the fact some enemies will destroy them or make them disappear if you place them in the wrong place, it's not a good look for this element. So of course, when Navia only interacts with crystallized shards and doesn't really depend on Geo constructs unless she's playing with someone like Albedo, I mean, she's basically trying to distance herself from Geo elements while at the same time she's using a Geo reaction. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but the point is, she's a really good damage dealer. Subjectively speaking, she also has a really fun playstyle, and I'm not sure what Chiori is going to do when she comes out, but after getting Navia since the last Geo unit, which was like, I don't know, 1.5 years ago I think, it's kind of refreshing to be honest to see this. Still, yet again, she's just a damage dealer. She doesn't really buff or enable anybody else. However, if you're a Geo Element fan and you're tired of playing with Noelle or Ito, then she is a great choice to spice things up. Now, personally, Chevreuse is probably one of my most favorite 4-star units to be released in this game. And what she basically does is kind of similar to Nilo. If you build a team purely out of Pyro and Electro characters, then when anyone in the team triggers an overload reaction, the enemy affected by this reaction will have their Pyro and Electro resistances reduced by 40%. That's essentially a free Viridescent Venereer Forcehead artifact the team can use. Now, I wouldn't say she drastically raises the power level of Pyro and Electro team comps, and some of these teams will not be completely meta, but for example, in some chambers like the previous Abyss cycle, when facing the Hydro boss, man, the team was insane against it, and it was a perfect example when a certain team comp or even an archetype can be superior compared to others. I also like the fact that Chevreuse is kinda like Navia. She is revitalizing an unpopular reaction because while Overload's damage can be good if you build for it, the biggest problem, obviously, is the knockback it can cause to smaller enemies. I mean, heck, even bigger enemies can be staggered pretty badly. So, if you are going up against a big boss who cannot be staggered, Chevreuse teams are pretty good to be honest. And of course, if you pull for more Chevreuse constellations, she will start providing even more value for her team. But overall, I think she's a very welcome addition to the game. And I hope to see more new 4-stars who can enable a new archetype for teams. And finally, we have Gaming and Xianyun. Now, since recording this video, it's only been a couple of weeks since they've been released, so I don't really have the strongest opinion about them. I usually like to play with the new unit for at least a month before I can make a final decision about them, but so far, Gaming seems to be a pretty strong damage dealer. However, his biggest problem is that at C0, he desperately needs really strong supports to function as a, well, good damage dealer. Like without Furina, Benny, or even Xianyun, his damage performance is not that amazing. And on top of that, C0 compared to C6 Gaming is a day and night difference. Like, you can see here his C6 damage performance. It's kinda insane, to be honest. So yeah, he's one of those 4 stars where you definitely want to obtain more constellations, and you definitely want to use some of the best units to enable his full potential. And when it comes to Xianyun, I love the fact she has now made a lot of characters be viable as splunge damage dealers. Like, some of the biggest winners that come to mind is obviously Diluc. Xiao also benefits a lot from her, but honestly, almost any Claymore character will be able to function really well with Xianyun. However, you do need to have a C6 Benny for this to work, and you also need to equip a Pyro Goblet on your Claymore user, so that when they're using Pyro Application from Benny, they can deal better damage. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of Xianyun's value also gets amplified by Furina, because Xianyun's healing is really good, and while her passive can increase plunge damage by a certain amount of Xianyun's attack, this plunge damage becomes a lot more better with Furina's buffing. Not to mention the fact that Furina can apply enough Hydro and help a lot of the Pyro Claymore users to deal vape damage with her off-field Hydro application. But yeah, these are basically my thoughts about the characters who came out during Fontaine arc. If Hoyoverse is still following the same formula, we're probably still gonna see 4.5, 4.6, 4.7, and 4.8 updates for Fontaine. And I have made this type of video before, where I rank characters from the major region updates. And right now it will look like this, although there's still a lot of updates left, so this might change heavily. So keep this in mind. But basically, in my opinion, Fontaine characters feel a lot more complex compared to the previous region updates, but at the same time, compared to Sumeru, which introduced Dendro Reaction, Fontaine has introduced this whole mechanic where you interact with the loss of HP of a character. But in my opinion, the biggest winners are those who can at least make some changes to the game. So for example, Navia making changes to Crystallize, or Chevreuse making changes to Overload Reaction. Like, the game is getting old, and because elemental reactions are such a big part of it, I think it would be nice to see more characters who can manipulate or benefit from these reactions. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd really appreciate it if you could press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.